So just a little bit of while waiting for some people to join, I am just a bit of scene setting and contracting. I am in my home office, which is the cabinet bottom of my garden, which is normally fine, but clearly in the current situation where we are all social distancing and self-isolating, I've got quite a lot of activity going on. So my husband is cutting my son's hair in the garden. The dog is in the garden with them. So some barking might be likely. And my daughter is using this room behind me in my office as a schoolwork room. So who knows what might happen, but I thought if I set the scene, then we might be safe. So thank you ever so much for joining our webinar today on the dark side of positive psychology. And before I get into why we're going to do that, I'll introduce you to Laura, who you can't see or hear at the moment, but Laura is our marketing manager and she's a panelist and she's going to keep an eye on the Q&A. So there's anyone who's not familiar with webinar on Zoom, there are the options to use chat and to use Q&A if you've got any comments. If you could all please use the Q&A, and what Laura's going to do, she's going to keep an eye on that. So if anyone's got any questions, obviously there'll be time for some questions at the end, but I think it's more helpful. I personally like it when you can ask questions as we go through. So if it's anything you have a question about, you have a statement to make, you want to discuss something, you want a little bit more information, anything you need, if you put it into Q&A, Laura's going to monitor it. And I think I get a little ping anyway if something comes up, and I'm more than happy to stop as we go through rather than wait to the end, but there'll also be the chance to ask questions at the end. Right, so there's something in chat at the minute actually, which says, hello everyone. Hello Karen. If you can put anything into Q&A, that would be fantastic. And then Laura can keep an eye on it. So I think that's it on the intros. I'm Lou, for those of you that don't know me. I am the founder of Rising Vibe, and I'll tell you a little bit about Rising Vibe so you get a bit of insight into why this subject is very important to us. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is we are all about how do we help ourselves to find relief and feel better in any given situation. That's what we're about. Take COVID out of it for a minute. I mean, that's pretty impossible because it's everywhere. But the brand is about feeling better. So one of our straplines is feel better, do better. We are not about positivity and happiness, although I love it when I'm feeling genuinely positive and happy. But we're called Rising Vibe, not good vibes, positive vibes. We're called Rising Vibe because we're all about how do you lift your vibration? How can you help yourself to feel better? And even before we were in the situation we are in now with COVID, we've always found this a challenge in terms of the constant pressure. And this applies to life. I'm going to use a lot of business context, but this is, you know, I tend to use a lot of metaphor anyway. This is about life, but there is a lot of pressure, especially in business, to be positive, to be motivated, to be driven, to be passionate, all of those things, which of course are brilliant. And when we are genuinely feeling those things, really, really enabling for all of us. However, we feel a lot of other emotions too. And we feel more what we would call low vibe more often than high vibe, and I'll explain to you why that is. So when we're not feeling great and there is a sense of not being able, allowed, encouraged to talk about not feeling good, it actually adds more pressure. And right now, with the current situation, you know, this is even more significant. And I have seen a lot of social media. I'm trying to stay away from it to a point because some of it is unhelpful, right? It takes our focus into an unhelpful direction, which means we don't feel great with some of the stuff that we're reading about. But there is quite a lot of stuff on social media, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, talking about, you know, look on the bright side. What are the opportunities? Look for the positives. Be grateful for what you have. Be appreciative of what this is teaching us. And I can connect to a lot of that sometimes, and sometimes I can't. And this positive psychology theory is a little bit misunderstood. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about it because actually the reality of positive psychology, when you dig into it, is pretty much aligned with what we do at Rising Vibe. But the way it's being used out there, outside of the positive psychologists, I guess, is unhelpful. And I feel very passionate about it, and those of you that know me will know this. And we're totally up for the debate as well around, if you think I'm talking nonsense and you totally disagree, let's just have a debate about it, because I love that. So please use the Q&A for that as well. So first of all, why are my slides not moving? Right, move. Aha, here we go. So just a little bit about Rising Vibe for those of you that don't know us. So we are culture consultants. So I'm going to keep my glasses on, very hot and they're sliding off my nose. So I apologise for the constant me doing this. I don't think it's going to happen. So we're culture consultants, and what we mean by that, how we describe that is, we work with our clients to help them either define, if they haven't got anything already, or refine what they've already got, which is usually values, mission statement, a charter, some principles, to bring those to life so that the organisation knows what's expected of them in terms of what is the culture around here, and what does that mean in terms of how you expect me to do things, how you expect me to show up around here. So we work with our clients to help them define that culture, which would be their B point, where they're heading to. And that can be the whole organisation, which when we work with small and medium enterprises, we tend to do it organisation-wide. And we do a lot of culture work in terms of departments, teams, helping them to define and refine their own culture, but making sure it fits with the wider organisational culture, but that it means something to them, so that it's very clear how they're expected to be. The interesting thing with this is that we find a lot of people talk about the culture as if it's outside of them. So the culture is very toxic around here. The culture is not supporting us during COVID. The culture this, the culture that. Actually, if you work in an organisation, if you are part of any organisation, well, actually, if you're part of any family, any group, you are part of that culture. It is not separate to you. And this is a big challenge that we find, that a lot of people in business are disassociating themselves with the culture in their business because they feel like they haven't got any power, haven't got any influence. Actually, it doesn't matter what they do, especially if they're not a senior leader. Actually, if all of us could take on the mindset that we are the culture, I think things would feel very, very different. I think, is there a question up there? Great intro. Thank you very much. So this is really key. So when we're defining and refining a culture, the B point, it's really important that the wider organisation, wherever possible, are involved in that. We also then help our clients to define where they're starting from. So what's your A point? In context of where you want to be and how you want your culture to be, where you're starting from. And then what we do is design learning and development solutions to support the organisation, to partner them, to move them from the A to the B. Sounds straightforward. Obviously, it's not a quick fix. It takes some focus and commitment, but that in a nutshell is what we do. The approach we take is a coaching approach. And our definition of coaching at Rising Vibe is we help people to help themselves. And when you do that, when you challenge and support people to help themselves, because we can't make anyone feel anything, we can't make people do anything. We can encourage, support, challenge, influence, but we can't make anyone do anything. So working at coaching with a coaching approach means you're more likely to impact at an individual level. So the questions, the problems we're challenging, the outcomes that we want will land more on the individual, which when they connect to that and make a change is more likely to impact the collective result. So we don't blanket approach. We target the individual, but you can do that on a large scale level. And you'll find today, as we go through this webinar, some of the comments I make, some of the questions I might pose, who knows what they'll be, by the way, but will land on you, and they'll be very individual, but they'll land for everybody. And potentially some of the answers might be similar, might be different. And that's why we work with our clients, so that we can access everybody and where that and how they are feeling, which I'll talk a bit more about in a minute. What is really key around culture, well, anything actually, especially when you're talking about boundaries, holding people to account, is being very explicit around what is expected, and then making sure you don't accept anything different. So I always use this example that in my house, we talk on a regular basis about don't shout from another room. If you want something, come into the room. And I find myself shouting on a regular basis from another room, stop shouting from another room. So guess what? Everybody shouts from another room in our house because nobody is role modeling anything differently. We say, don't shout from another room, but then we accept a very different behavior. This happens in business all of the time. Where we particularly see it is around conversations. if you take feedback, huge thing, very common, something that's looked at, developed, discussed on a regular basis within most of our client portfolio. If we agreed that our culture is about saying what we mean to the person we need to say it to, in very simple terms, that's quite clear what we expect. So no one going to someone else and making a different, making a comment that Lou told Laura that you said this and I want to talk to you about it. No second, third, fourth hand feedback. That's what we say we expect. And yet we accept a very different way. So Laura comes to me and says, I'm really irritated with Paul. And I say, oh God, yeah, I find it quite irritating too. What happened? We have a little conversation about it. And then Laura feels a bit better because she's had a bit of a vent. Then she goes off and I go off. I'm not actually holding Laura to account around what we've agreed. I could say to her instead, okay, so what would it take? What support do you need to go and have this conversation with Paul? And Laura might say, well, I don't want to speak to Paul directly. And I would say, well, that's what we've agreed that we would do as part of this culture. So unless you want some help with that, there's no point talking to me about it. That is exactly, perfect world, utopia, how a culture becomes embedded, and where we see the biggest issue with organizational cultures is that even if you've got some explicit clarity around what's expected, what is accepted is completely different a lot of the time. So you may as well have not put all that work in. Now, what we really focus on in terms of the cultures we support our clients to create is that every single person in that business is able to feel safe, secure, and being able to work without the fear of consequence. Now, that doesn't mean people can just get away with showing up and behaving in a way that's really unhelpful. I don't mean that. What I mean is people feel able to challenge. People feel able to be honest about how they're feeling. This is what this work that we do is all about. People are able to say, do you know what? I know you're really talking about being positive through this, but I'm really struggling. That is exactly the kind of environment, the culture that we are supporting and challenging our clients to create, where psychological safety is in place. And right now, there is a lot of, generally in organizations, people feeling unable to say, I'm not happy, I don't agree, because I don't want to be seen as negative. And with this current external situation that we cannot control with COVID, that's really magnifying some of this for people. So I think there's a few comments up here actually, isn't there? Is there comments? So
yeah, we've got a couple of comments. Will you be talking about organisational terrorists who won't accept they are part of the culture?
Well, I wasn't going to, but you know what? We can. I'll add that to my list. Let's add that. I'll have that. Organisational terrorists. So what's interesting with that, just as a initial thought, we talk at Rise and Vibe about focus of attention and framing. So a really simple example is that really recent one, NHS Nightingale, when that was nearly finished and they transformed the Excel and it was on the TV, myself and my daughter were watching it. And so we're both seeing the same thing. We're both seeing the same visual. She said, God, look at all those people that they're going to die. And I said, actually, I'm looking at that thinking, look at all the people they're going to save. So my focus of attention was on what might go right, and hers was on what will go wrong. She was then thinking very unhelpful thoughts like, look at all the people who are going to die. And I was thinking, look at the people they might save. I was feeling hope, she was feeling fear. The framing, the focus that we have around anything massively impacts how we feel, which I'm going to talk about a bit more, and therefore how we show up. So I totally know what you mean when you talk about organisational terrorists. But actually that frame means that we're going to be looking for the terrorist in that person or group of people, rather than being open to seeing something else. Easier said than done, by the way, especially if this person or group of people consistently show up behaving in a way that would suggest they are trying to cause issues. But in my experience, people don't want to cause issues as a rule. They're just not feeling good, which is why they show up like that. And by the way, that doesn't mean we should tolerate it, but it's just an interesting frame. Like I hear, you know, they're a toxic leader. Actually, no one is factually toxic, but the way they behave can feel toxic. So it might sound like I'm being pedantic, but the nuance of language in this stuff is really key in terms of impacting how we feel about something. Is there a couple of others up there? I don't want to move on before if there's...
Yeah, we've got Dom saying terrorists or mavericks.
Terrorists or mavericks. Yes, I was called a maverick many times. I do like that one, clearly, because that connects with me more, but actually it has the same connotation for different people. So yeah, The way that we're framing things is really key.
I think we've got a question in the chat. We are finding people up and down just now. Some days good, some days bad. My take on this is that we need to not beat ourselves up. Things are tough and there are days when it makes us feel bad. What's your take?
Absolutely. So let's just park that for a minute, because that's what I'm going to talk about. I completely agree with that. And I guess just bearing in mind what you've said there, and then the kind of organisational terrorist, the maverick thing, what is really important with the work that we do is we absolutely is feeling safe, secure, and being able to work without the fear of negative consequences is so important for all of us. That doesn't mean that something that consistently happens, so the kind of behaviour that's really unhelpful, that never changes, they might be owning it and saying, well, I'm just in a bad place, I'm just in a bad place. There has to be a cut-off. I just want to be really clear about that. You know, the work that we do is about really checking in with people around how they're feeling, but also holding them to account. This is really important. Holding people to account and caring about them in equal measure is where you're going to get the best results. Just caring without holding people to account, not helpful. Just holding people to account around KPIs, deliverables and tasks without checking in around how they're doing, also not so helpful. So doing the two together is really key. And sometimes people misinterpret this kind of work to mean, oh, so people can just get away with how they're behaving if they're being honest about how they feel. No, that's not what we mean. We are all about, the first step is owning how you feel, and then being open to some support and challenge around helping yourself to feel better. So we're going to talk about that, the up and down thing. So I'll definitely talk about that. Is there something else in there, Laura?
Just saying, spot on. We are the culture. As some individuals are their worst enemy and promote negative ripples, I suppose that leadership need to offer open communication and embedding, assuming that they have the will and capability.
Yes, yeah. And it's interesting, the leaders bit, which I'll probably come on to, that there's a lot of leaders putting a lot of pressure on themselves right now, actually, to get it right. And I don't think there is such a thing as getting it right, but at the minute. So I'll talk about a bit about that in a minute as well when I move on to the next couple of slides. So that is what Rising Vibe does. And calling out the men as our sub-brand, and calling out the men is focused on providing emotional support for men in business, because we're all out for gender balance, gender equality, gender parity, massive supporters of that. And it is not equal when it comes to emotional support. It's getting better, but when you Google support for men in business and you Google support for women in business, when you Google support for men in business, it just talks about all the things you can do to support women. So it's not balanced there. So we are, I guess, deliberately being very overt and provocative about the men's side of emotion, because it's something I feel really passionate about, but it still fits in massively into the cultural work that we do. You can ask more questions about that if you need to, of course. So why do we use emotion to drive cultural change? Which leads massively into the positive psychology thing. So emotion will drive engagement or resistance. With a lot of our clients that we're working with, the ones we've worked with for a long time, they absolutely are out there about emotion, feelings, how you're doing. It's on their radar. But for a lot of organizations, emotion and business do not go in the same sentence for them. The reason it is so key is that when we feel good about something, we will engage in it. We will be open to it. We will look for opportunity. We will look for possibility. We will be prepared to learn. We will be prepared to change. When we don't feel good about something, we will resist it. And unless you can get underneath that, a lot of the intervention solutions out there that are happening, it's a waste of investment, because people are not getting on board with it. They might be saying they are, because actually it's not a good thing to say that you're struggling or you don't buy into it. But unless you can help people, and I'm not saying that they have to feel euphoric about it, by the way, but unless you can help people get into a better place about an event, a project, a whole organization, their line manager, their peer group, their direct reports, whatever it might be, if they're not feeling good or unable to help themselves feel better about something, they won't engage. So we access everything via emotion. We're also hardwired for connection. So the reptilian brain is always looking for threat, and we feel most at threat when we're not part of a tribe. So on a spectrum, you know, some people want to be around anybody they can because they have a huge need for connecting with anyone they can connect with. You know, the more the extrovert people, the introverts still need it, but they're more, they choose. It's more important who it is. They don't need everybody, but they need certain people. But we all need connection. And without that, we will experience social pain. And social pain, I know some of you know this, that are joining us here, are feelings of isolation, rejection, disconnection, exclusion, rejection, not feeling heard, not feeling able to influence, feeling misunderstood. Now that exists day to day for all of us. We even feel social pain before we experience it. You know, the fear of judgment will elicit social pain for us, and we often feel the fear of judgment before we've even been judged. You know, public speaking is a classic. And social pain is experienced in exactly the same way as physical pain. The same part of the brain lights up, the anterior cingulate, when we are in social pain as it does when we're in physical pain. So this is a real thing. For the skeptics out there who say, you know, we don't do emotion, for the skeptics out there who say, and you know, I've worked with some of them, you know, you're a manager, you're a leader, you're paid a lot of money, you don't get on with someone in your team, tough, get on with it. Now, we need to work through it, but just saying get on with it like it's insignificant, it's not a big deal. If it is eliciting social pain, it is a big deal. And anyone who's ever experienced chronic physical pain will know how exhausting that is. Social pain has the same impact on us. So emotion is everywhere. And even those that say, I don't really do feelings, you do them. We just might not be comfortable expressing them or comfortable acknowledging them. That's quite common too, but we all feel. So emotion is the way to drive any change, because it helps us engage or we resist. And COVID-19 means that low vibe emotions are greater than ever right now. So we talk about high vibe and low vibe emotions, and fear, anxiety, and despair are three of the very low vibe emotions. And we cannot control what's going on in the external world. We can only control how we're feeling and what we're thinking about. But right now, a lot of people are feeling really out of control because of the uncertainty, because of what's going on in the external world. So many more people than usual, and some people who were struggling anyway are getting even more stuck in these places. So the pressure to be positive right now, which I am seeing and hearing, is really unhelpful. The intent is usually really positive, by the way. You know, people want us to feel better. You know, there are a few people in the world, very small percentage, who don't want to see people in a great place. But generally speaking, especially when we work with people we care about, we want them to feel good. So we are trying to make them feel better by asking them to look on the bright side and be positive, but actually it makes it worse for a lot of people. So the intent is positive, but the impact is often really unhelpful. Was there any, I can see some questions.
It's some agreement from earlier. Being honest is key. Showing it's tough as a leader, I think, is important, as is being authentic, being real. We're all human, no matter what level. And caring and holding to account in equal measure. Love this. Very similar to radical candor.
Oh, I haven't heard of that, but
there is a query. Caring without holding to account is enabling.
Is enabling?
Yeah, is it not?
Is it not? Okay, I'll give you an example. This is a real life example of mine. So about 5 years ago, there was someone in my team, it might have been 4 or 5 years ago, who was having a really tough time. Lots of stuff going on in their personal life that was quite extreme. And I knew about this. And there was some stuff that was happening in the business that wasn't quite working. Not underperformance, but some behavior, some interactions that wasn't quite working for the brand. And in normal circumstances, I would have called that out straight away. This is the only time I've never really done that. So it's been a great piece of learning for me. What I did was not put in boundaries. I didn't call stuff out that I would normally, because I recognized that this person was having a really tough time outside of work and I cared about that. However, what happened was we ended up getting some negative feedback from a client, which I'm proud to say is rare. It doesn't really happen. Of course, we get things about, can we change that? Can we do that differently? Really important, but really negative feedback has never happened. So this was a big deal, and it was about this individual. There was no way I could ignore that. So I had to have that conversation, which I would normally do ongoing, but it was almost like I went from 0 to 100. I hadn't been calling it out, and then this happened, and I did. And the reaction was not great. The reaction was probably what I would have expected based on what I knew was going on, but it was very intensified, very emotionally charged, and it didn't end well. Now, the behavior was not okay. The behavior on the back of me eventually calling it was not acceptable. However, my contribution to that was that I had not called it all the way through, which is what I talk about all the time. So I guess what I'm saying is, just caring about somebody without holding them to account, in the short term, by the way, might not be a bad thing. I'm not saying it's bad. So if someone has had some loss or is grieving, you know, something very extreme that's happened in their lives, to know that and to put some flexibility and a little bit of slack in there, absolutely. But when it continues, it's not helpful. So I guess my hindsight reflection, my learning from that is to have maybe not called it out in the way that I would normally call it out, but to still call it out and be very explicit around the fact that I was not calling it out in the way I normally would, because I was aware of what was going on. I didn't do that because I felt so much compassion and empathy for what they were going through, but it ended really badly. And my contribution was I didn't hold them to account along the way. I ignored it because of the tough time they were having. And actually, you know, this has probably been the toughest month of my career, which I know it is for many people, by the way, and many leaders. You know, I talk about this stuff for a living. We do this stuff for a living. So the added pressure on me to get this right has felt really, really strong. And my self-doubt, self-beration, sleepless nights, I've never experienced anything like it. And one particular person, a couple of people in the team responded to the situation in a way that surprised me. And we had to furlough some people. Eventually we got to furlough. It's been very complicated. It's been very difficult, like it is for everybody. And some of the responses were not as I would have hoped. And I could have not called that out either. I could have ignored it and said, well, times are tough. This is extreme, unprecedented, as we keep hearing. This is a crisis. It's global. You need to be a little bit slack. Actually, based on what I'd learned before, I still called it. It was extremely uncomfortable for me because I was aware of what else has been going on. I then was challenging myself, thinking, did I get it right? Should I have done that? Have I got it wrong? This is what I think a lot of leaders are going through at the minute. But what I didn't do was pretend to be positive and okay about it. Not once. If I tried to do that on top of managing all of those low vibe emotions, it would have really not ended well. And I probably wouldn't have held this person, these people to account. I wouldn't have called it. When I say hold to account, I mean call out the behavior that as a business we say we don't do. So I don't know if that answers the question. So I'm not saying a little bit of slack isn't kind, but as I said before about if someone keeps showing up in a way that's unhelpful and are being honest about it, there's still a cutoff if it's not changing. So there's a fine line, but actually it's a big significant difference. If that doesn't answer your question, just chuck something else into the Q&A and we can discuss it further. So let's just talk a bit about positive psychology. So positive psychology is the specific study of what makes life worth living. I can connect to that. I think studying what makes life worth living, when you do research, I think that's very relevant, very powerful stuff. Maslow, actually in 1954, he coined the phrase of positive psychology, which actually I didn't know. And of course, the hierarchy of needs would have come from that work. You know, what are our basic needs? What helps us take to, you know, to the ultimate? What is it that we are here for? Our meaning and our. But he was the one who coined the phrase of positive psychology. And one of the reasons why he did that is that he really didn't connect to the fact that psychology back then was just talking about dysfunction and disorder all the time. There was nothing about kind of the flip side of that. And again, I read that and I go completely connect to that. It was very much focused on, it is very much focused on building the good life rather than repairing the bad. I have a bit of reaction to that because I don't really connect to binary language. We try and avoid binary language, rising vibes. So good and bad is binary, right and wrong is binary. Appropriate, inappropriate is pretty binary. We tend to talk in language of, is it helping or not helping? Now, of course, we know there is some stuff that happens in life that is not good. I'm not talking about that, okay? I'm talking about framing things as good and bad behavior, as right and wrong. It's just not helpful. And it takes our focus into an unhelpful place, which we'll talk about a little bit more. So I connect to focusing on what might go right rather than what might go wrong, but the good life rather than the bad life. Who's to say what a good life is and a bad life is, I guess, is part of my chance to that. It's also focused on the positive aspects of human experience. So again, from a research basis, I think that's brilliant. You know, what are the things that help humans feel better? That would be my language, rising vibe language. So I'm not anti any of that. So when I talk about the dark side of positive psychology, I'm not talking about the concept here in terms of theory. I connect with it, as I'm sure many of you do as you're listening to this. So a guy called Seligman, I think that's how you pronounce it. That's how I pronounce it. If I pronounce it incorrectly, someone let me know if you know the real pronunciation. In the 1960s and 70s, he developed the learned helplessness theory, which is fascinating if you want to look him up. He, and this makes total sense actually, that he discovered that humans and animals actually can learn to become helpless and feel a loss of control. So any of you who are familiar with the drama triangle, I guess, people in a victim mindset who actually stay stuck there, there's no point, I can't do it, it's not worth it, no one cares, that kind of giving up. He kind of started all that kind of work back in the 60s and 70s. But he, like Maslow, became very frustrated with the focus on the negative, with little attention to well-being and flourishing. So he had a very similar outlook, and what he did in 1998, he's in the US. I can't remember, he got some position in the US government, and as a result of that, he developed the subfield of psychology called life giving, not life depleting. Now I really connect to that, because that doesn't feel binary to me. That feels open and fluid, with opportunity to discuss and debate, that you are looking for opportunities to give stuff to your life rather than deplete it. And we talk at Rising Vibe about, where's your focus of attention? What kind of things are you doing? What kind of people are you spending time with? What are you thinking about that might deplete your energy and take you low vibe, versus replenish your energy and take you to a high vibe place? So again, massively connect all this. And in summary, positive psychology is about an emphasis on happiness, well-being, and positivity. The fact that happiness and positivity are in there as words is what I notice ongoing, not just in this situation, causes the challenge. Happiness and positivity are just two high vibe emotions in the Rising Vibe world, and they are talked about so much that it can feel really disengaging. There are now organizations that have chief happiness officers, which I'm not saying it's not wrong, it's a choice, but the pressure that brings, you're a chief happiness officer. What does that mean? You can't have a bad day? It means you can't talk about anything else. It might not mean that, but that's immediately what it says to me. So language is so key here. The study of the good life, the positive aspects of the human experience that make life worth living, and it focuses on both individual and societal well-being. That's what positive psychology does. I think there's a question, is there, Laura?
There is. Is it reasonable to call someone's behaviour out as helpful or unhelpful, or is it something you'd consider more of an internal judgment?
So the helpful and unhelpful framing, what might make this a little bit clearer, is it's all about the outcome. It's all about the outcome. So if you, this is a story, if some people on here have worked with us before, they'll know the story. So bear with me for a couple of minutes. This is a metaphor example. I was on a train coming home from work one day, and I was opposite a guy who was on his laptop like me, and on the table, at the side, on a table of four, there was two girls next to me. I'd been shopping in London for the day, had loads of bags, and as we started our journey, they got out some crisps and dip and some Prosecco and wine, and we'd had a little bit of a chat, the four of us, before we'd set off, and the guy opposite said to them, "Oh, girls, you don't want to be doing that." Now, I said, well, it depends on their outcome. If they want to load up on some calories and get a little bit drunk, that's exactly what they need to be doing. If they are on a diet or want to keep a clear head for tomorrow morning, it's probably not exactly the most helpful thing for them to be doing. So that's how I think about how we're feeling, and therefore the behavior that we're presenting. So if I'm feeling despair, and so my dad has diabetes, he's had toes and finger off, and obviously you have to be shielded. I've got quite a lot of anxiety, despair around that. Now, there is nothing wrong with me feeling that. However, if I had spent the half an hour before coming on this webinar focused on worrying about my dad, it's not going to help me show up and be the best version of myself on this webinar. It's not wrong, but it's probably not helpful. On the flip side, if I'm working in an organization where there has been a load of redundancies that people wanted, and then some people that wanted them, this is a true story by the way, and didn't get them, and I'm still having to work with this group of people for the next 3 to 6 months. Some of these people know they're being made redundant and are joyous, euphoric. These people are not being made redundant and are despairing, anxious, resentful. If I rock up and I'm having to work with the people that are not being made redundant and I'm euphoric and joyous, doesn't make it wrong, but I probably need to be flexible with how I'm behaving, so it's going to help me engage and connect with them more. So in terms of behaviour, for me, it's about, is the way they're behaving right now helping either embed the culture, helping the team, helping results, helping a dynamic, helping the interaction, helping the project, or not? That would be the way that I would frame it. And it's a great conversation and a coaching way to have, which is based on what just happened, what I observed, and what we're trying to achieve here. Do you think that's helping or not helping? It's just less provocative. You're still calling it out, but you're not being provocative. As soon as you say to anyone, that's wrong, I'm right, that's bad, I'm good, it's really provocative. And immediately, because we're human and we feel under threat, we will not feel good and we'll resist. Whereas talking about, is it helping or not helping, it's more subjective, but if you attach it to an outcome, you are much more likely to have a more effective interaction actually and result on the back of it. Does that answer your question? Let me know if it doesn't, and we'll come back to it. So what's the rising vibe philosophy? Well, we buy into happiness and positivity when it's real. I love feeling all of those things when it's real. I and the business, we are very anti trying to silver line things for people, trying to make them feel better, because we cannot make them feel better. It's been very interesting, actually. We've been doing some support groups with the NHS, just doing some Zooms, and got a close Facebook group. And it was a bit of a, well, it was a huge light bulb moment for some of them when we were talking about this kind of thing. And I said, as nurses and doctors, you are not responsible for making people feel better. In fact, you can't. You can help them get better by looking after them and giving them advice, but you can't make them feel better. And that is true for all of us. Some of us have much more that way, where we are always wanting to do things for other people, and we are trying to help them access a better place. We can't make them access anything. As this quote says, which I love, never in the history of calming down has anyone calmed down by being told to calm down. If you're not feeling good, someone telling you to feel differently is not going to help. In fact, it can make you feel a lot worse. And just last week, I had a group of delegates on a call, and it's a new program, so we're quite new to each other, and we're having a bit of a check-in and talking about the challenge of working from home. And one of the ladies there who has got a team she's trying to manage still remotely. She's got both her parents live in an annex with them. Her mum has dementia, and she has 2 children with special needs. And she was talking about the challenge of generally being at home without any respite. She was also talking about the challenge of trying to manage the team remotely. And she said about 3 times in a very short period of time, you know, I'm trying to be grateful for what I've got, and I'm trying to look on the bright side. And I stopped her and I said, it doesn't sound like right now there's any bright side for you. Which, if you step outside of what we're talking about here, that doesn't sound particularly kind. Actually, I was just connecting with where she was. She became very emotional in that moment and then said, do you know what, that's the first time I felt like I've been heard. So she had had a lot of people telling her she needed to be positive and look on the bright side because they wanted her to feel better, because they cared. The intent was positive, but what it did was actually made her feel worse. When someone said it doesn't sound like there's anything, that, you know, there's not a bright side right now, she actually felt like she was being heard for the first time. Any of you that are familiar with Brené Brown, she does some brilliant work on shame and vulnerability and emotion. And there's a brilliant little short film called Empathy versus Sympathy. And she talks about this stuff in terms of how we might say to somebody, well, at least, because we want them to feel better, when in fact it means we're dismissing what they've said. You know, I'm getting divorced, well, at least you've been married. You know, I've had a miscarriage, at least you can get pregnant. The intention's really positive, but it doesn't help, because what it does is take that person to a place of, you've not heard me. And that is going to actually keep them lower vibe. So we're hardwired to scan for danger. Therefore, our default is not happiness and positivity. So I've mentioned the reptilian brain already. With the reptilian brain, we are hardwired to scan for danger and look for threat. The reptilian brain is still the most powerful brain. The emotional and the rational brain came second and third. They have not got the power of the reptilian brain. When we feel under threat, which right now people are feeling more threat than ever, we will be scanning constantly for what danger am I in? What danger am I in? And right now we don't have to look very far, right? Whether it's I'm going to get the virus, someone I love is going to get the virus, I might lose my job, my business might go under, I've been furloughed, I feel shame of that. Whatever it might be, people are feeling threat. We need 5 positive experiences of something to override 1 negative. That is how we're hardwired, which means we are always looking for danger. We're always looking for the problems to solve. Where we focus our attention will impact what we're thinking about, which impacts how we feel. So going back to the NHS Nightingale example that I talked about at the beginning, I'm looking at a visual of lots of beds and ventilators. I'm saying to myself, wow, look at the people they could save, because I'm focused on what might go right, not what might go wrong. I've had to practice that. I don't immediately go there, but I practice it. Therefore, if my thoughts are, look at all the people we're going to save, I feel better. I feel hopeful. I feel calm. Not positive, but I feel calm. If I am focusing on what might go wrong, which, by the way, is our default. It's our default. Not many of us practice shifting that. We go to catastrophic fantasy. We never go to, oh, what's the best case in this scenario? We all go to worst case first, and most of us stay stuck there. So the fact that that is the way we're hardwired, we can change it with some practice, but our default is not happiness and positivity. Again, another challenge. The pressure to be positive can make things worse, as I just talked about, and we can't make anyone feel anything. Again, what I've just talked about. And it's also exhausting when we are always focused on what can we do for other people. The best thing we can do is focus on ourselves, especially as leaders right now, and go, right, how do I make sure I'm looking after myself? How can I reassure myself so I'm then more able to reassure my team? We can't reassure about COVID, we can't reassure about timescales, but reassure in terms of looking at what might go right, for example, instead. I think that was a question. Was it a question?
It's a statement. We can give ourselves such a hard time for having organic responses.
Oh, yeah. It's just, just knowing that we're hardwired on a ratio of 5-to-1 scan for danger helps me. I can say, this is just your thing. This is just the brain. It's just going, you're just self-preserving. You're just self-preserving. You don't need to self-preserve. What else could you think about? What else could you focus on? What else could it be? But I've really had to practice that. We're all the same. It's a human thing. So again, the rising vibe philosophy, empathy and being heard might not bring positivity, but it definitely brings relief. The example I just gave you of the delegate, saying it doesn't feel like there's a bright side. She actually said, thank you, this feels better. She actually started feeling a little bit better because someone had not tried to make her feel better. And all of you will have experienced that at some point. If you reflect on this, you will know there'll be a time when you have tried to make someone else feel better, or someone's tried to make you feel better, and actually it's really irritating at best and soul destroying at worst. Actually, one of my best friends had breast cancer in 2014, and she had the operation to remove the lump, and I said, make sure you let me know as soon as you're out. Text me. And she texted me and said, I'm out, actually I don't feel too bad, but my left boob looks really small. I nearly messaged back, at least it means they've got it all. I haven't got any idea whether or not they've got it all. I wanted to make her feel better because I didn't like the fact that she was where she was and I was feeling afraid. I stopped myself and instead I replied and I said, that sounds crap. And she said, yeah, it does. So actually, me saying that wouldn't necessarily have helped anything. I was doing it to help myself too. And I talk about this stuff all day long, pretty much. So I'm not saying it's easy, but with some awareness, we can be much more mindful of this kind of thing. Was there another one coming?
Yeah, we've got a question actually. Lots of us have friends and family who are furloughed. Any suggestions on the language to use to support them?
Well, and I'm going to show you the scale at the end for those of you who haven't seen it, and you can download it from our website. Actually, the best thing we can ask anybody is, what do you need? What's going to help you right now? And a lot of people say to me, especially leaders who start doing the kind of work that we support them with, but what if I'm talking to someone about how they feel and they're really emotional? What if someone's really open about something and they get really upset? Or what if someone gets really angry? Or what if the one question to keep in your back pocket is, what do you need? What do you need right now? I can tell you're upset. What do you need? I can see you're angry. What do you need? What we try and do is second guess what people need. And what we then try and do is we give them what we need. So in a given situation, for me, for example, when I'm really upset, I need to withdraw a bit. I have a friend who will hug. Now, she's hugging because when she feels sad, low, vulnerable, she needs a hug. So she naturally goes to give me a hug because that's what she needs, but it's not what I need. The best thing we can do is say, what do you need? So in terms of language, if you've got friends and families being low, let's say furloughed, to ask them, what do you need? How are you feeling? What do you need to feel a bit better about this? They're two really simple coaching questions. Because bearing it in mind, you can't actually make them feel better, but by allowing them the space to share how they're feeling without trying to, reframe it for them and silver line it for them and, look on the bright side without giving any advice, unless they ask for it, just saying, you know, how you feeling, what do you need, and then listening and being present with them is the most powerful thing you can do. 100%. Was there another?
We have got another comment that what is hard is feeling guilty for feeling negative. If there is someone always worse off than you, it makes you feel down and then selfish.
Yeah, I mean, this is so common, and especially at the moment, like there's a lot of people, and definitely in our team too, we've had to furlough people, and then, you know, people have not been furloughed and actually are busier than ever, and there's like, it's something called survivor guilt, you know, that kind of feeling guilty because other people are worse off than you is a very natural thing. It's not selfish. You're just feeling it. It's just where you're at. And actually, other people might be worse off. That doesn't mean your emotions are not valid. That's not selfish. The way I describe selfish and self-care, the big difference, right? So selfish is not considering in the slightest what might someone else need. So this is a bit of a, not a great example, but if we were having, all of us were meeting up and we were having lunch, and I got there early and I was starving and I ate all the lunch. That's selfish, right? That's selfish. That's going, all that matters right now is what I need. That's selfish. Actually, self-care is about looking after yourself and sharing how you're feeling and talking to someone about how rubbish you feel is actually looking after yourself. And of course, there's always going to be someone worse off. But that doesn't mean that yours are not valid. That's really important. This is where comparison is really unhelpful. Comparison is the devil. Comparing yourself to someone who's worse off, or comparing yourself to someone you think is better than you, all that's going to do for all of us is drive low vibe emotion. So I guess my request, encourage, invite you to, when you notice that, just to say something to yourself like, yeah, there are people worse off, and that doesn't mean how I feel isn't valid. It's not selfish. That's just owning your stuff. I mean, it doesn't really answer the question, but that's my take on it. That's my view on it for sure. And that goes into all emotions are valid, none are right, wrong, bad, or appropriate. It's just whether or not they're helping or not helping, depending on the outcome that you want to achieve. We can't move to B unless we're honest about our A. So I talk about culture. What's the culture you want? Where you're starting from? It's the same for us in terms of emotion. If you want to feel better, but you're not admitting that you're feeling wretched, you're not going to start to feel better. I, for years, pretended I was just stressed when actually I was suffering with anxiety. I didn't actually get better until I said, I'm actually suffering with anxiety. It won't work. So we're never going to move forwards and feel better unless we're honest about where we're starting from. Fact. So, you know, owning that and not putting on a brave face and not being positive because that's the pressure you feel to be is the only way to move forwards. It's really unhelpful. You're going to stay stuck otherwise. Our emotions can help or hinder, but they're not right or wrong. Going back to what I said earlier, contrast is powerful and adds colour to our lives. It is important to feel the lows and the highs. It is really important. And ideally, we don't want to be feeling, you know, lows consistently. But like I've said, we're hardwired to look for problems. We're going to be thinking more on helpful thoughts and helpful thoughts. We're going to feel low vibe quite often. But the power of going from a low vibe to when you're feeling high vibe, that contrast is so wonderful. And without it, it's really challenging, actually. So with people I know who have been on certain medication where they felt flat. So the way they would describe it is, I just feel flat. I don't really feel. And they said, you know what, I'd rather be feeling the lows that I felt because I don't actually appreciate anything right now. I just feel flat. So the contrast is so key, and it's important to feel everything. So when we're really positive, feel it, but don't try and pretend it, because actually feeling the lows is the only way we're going to appreciate the highs. And without really acknowledging them, they're not going to go away. Those low vibe emotions are not going to go away. I always think about The Simpsons that I used to watch. My son was young because he used to love it. When Bart Simpson used to always irritate his dad, Homer Simpson, by grabbing his top and saying, Dad, 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 Dad. Homer would not go away until, Bart wouldn't go away until Homer turned to him and gave him his full attention. Small children do that, right? They don't go away until you give them your full attention. It's the same with emotions. We can push it away, we can deny it, we can pretend we're positive, we can put on a brave face, we can look on the bright side. But if we're not really feeling that, those low vibe emotions are not going to go away. And baby step shifts are key. Feeling less low vibe is progress. So, you know, you might be feeling anxious. I felt wretched during this last month of furloughing the team, some of the interactions, you know, psychological safety felt compromised. It was horrible, horrible. But what I did was notice when I felt slightly less anxious than I had the day before, or slightly less fearful, or slightly less resentful, or slightly less blaming, or slightly less angry, because I went through all of that. Feeling slightly less of something that doesn't feel good is progress. It doesn't have to be huge positivity. So positive psychology is out there being used and bandied around by non-positive psychologists, because actually there's a lot of positive psychology that massively aligns with our philosophy that I've just talked through, but that is not out there. All we're seeing is look on the bright side, look for gratitude, you need to appreciate what you've got, completely connect with that. But when you're feeling wretched, you can't. So I just wanted to share with you the side of positive psychology that massively aligns with us, which if we were seeing more of this, for me, it wouldn't have a dark side. It wouldn't feel so irritating with so much pressure. So all positive psychologists would say balance is important. So what I just talked about, contrast, that's what positive psychology also contains as part of its theory. Injecting a bit more optimism, the put a bit in brackets here, can give you a radically more positive outlook. I'm not sure I connect with the radically more positive outlook straight away, because, you know, if you're feeling despairing, you're not going to quantum leap into joy through injecting a bit more optimism. But what I do agree with is that looking for what might work, looking for what might not go wrong, is a more optimistic frame and can make you feel a little bit better. Positive psychology was introduced as a complement. It isn't all about being positive. It is about complementing the dysfunctional side of psychology. Again, that's not really talked about. That makes a difference. They also talk about it's a perspective shift. So if you shift a perspective, you can maximize your happiness potential. Again, this isn't wrong. It's just not a rising vibe philosophy thing. Maximizing happiness potential. Sometimes your perspective shift just means you feel a little bit less anxious. It doesn't mean you maximize your happiness potential. But what I do connect with is if you can get yourself into a place of managing shifts, perspective shifts ongoing, you do build momentum and you can start to learn how to feel high vibe more often. Simple actions, small simple actions can have a big impact. Absolutely, that's our baby step thing. The momentum, absolutely. I put in happiness in brackets. That's how they talk about it. But the happiness word is overused for me. For me, I'm not saying it's wrong. Forcing people who are not naturally optimistic to just think positively can cause more harm than good. This comes from the positive psychology theory, and actually, based on the reptilian brain stuff, we're not naturally optimistic. None of us are. We can train ourselves to be more naturally optimistic, but we're not born that way. We're born to look for threat. We're born to self-preserve. And I've already talked about how that can actually cause more harm, keep people stuck, drive more resentment. And unrealistic optimism is detrimental along with intense pessimism. Totally connect with that. You know, this stuff from positive psychology is pretty genius, actually. And rising vibe, we completely connect to that. The bit that we don't is all the stuff that's out there, which is be positive, happy, positive, not helpful. If you feel crap, you feel crap. If, however, you don't take action to help yourself feel better, that is also unhelpful. So just going back to what I said right at the beginning, this doesn't mean just because someone's being honest about the fact they don't feel good, that can continue for months and months and months, and they're not showing up in a helpful way, they're not performing. There has to be a cutoff, but the first step for all of us is actually acknowledging that we don't feel great. So this is our scale. Haven't got time to talk through it, and I know that some people on this webinar would be very familiar with this. Some of our clients who work with for a long time use this all the time as part of their culture. It is a very, very, very simple tool. This is, I guess, the entry point where you can use it just as a way of checking in with yourself and with your team and a one-to-one. I won't get into all the definition of the stuff at the top because of time, but if you want to know more, then just get in contact with us, and you can download this from our website on the Rising Vibrational Scale page. But what you'll see is there are, on the left, 7 what we call high vibe emotions, and on the right, 15 low vibe emotions. The reason there's more low vibe is because we are thinking more unhelpful thoughts more often, and that's why there's less high vibe. If you are stuck at 20, 21, 22, you are not going to be able to quantum leap to the high vibe, passionate, excited, anticipating. It's impossible to quantum leap, but it is possible to baby step with some slight shifts in where your focus is, shift your perspective, Am I focusing on what might go wrong? Am I focusing on what might go right? Am I focusing on options? Am I focusing on problems, which will drive what we think, which will drive how we feel? So really simple tool. There's also a worksheet that goes with it, with many more coaching questions. You can get deeper with it if you wanted to. But this is what we use with every single client we work with to help drive a culture where people start owning how they're really feeling. The main thing with this is you've got to keep showing up with it. It will not happen overnight where you start using the scale for a week. You're like, well, people aren't all talking about their emotions. It doesn't happen like that. Some people will go there straight away, some people not. And what every one of you will know from being in business, whether you're a leader or not, that what tends to happen is we implement something new, it doesn't work quickly enough, and we change and we implement something else. Don't do that. This kind of work, you've got to keep showing up, keep using it, keep showing up, keep using it. Someone might say, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm at number 6. Yeah, I'm at number 6. Yeah, I'm at number 6. And they might be. Or it might just be they're not comfortable yet telling you the truth. 6 months later, you check in once a month and say, actually, I'm feeling a little bit discouraged today. That needs to happen. People don't just click into psychological safety from nowhere if you've never done this kind of thing before. So you can download it, ask us any questions if you need to afterwards. And I guess my little flow of finding relief rather than being positive. And by the way, if you are, for example, maybe frustrated, irritated, impatient at 8, 9, 10, 11, you could, by following this little process, lift yourself into high vibe for sure. If you are much lower down the scale, and you've been much lower down the scale for a significant period of time, this isn't just going to click and you're not just going to get into a high vibe place, but you can feel less low vibe, which is progress. So the first thing is, when you're not feeling good, ask yourself, where's my focus of attention? What am I focusing my attention on right now? Because what I'm focusing my attention on will impact my thoughts. What I'm thinking about will impact how I'm feeling. So if I am, let's take the NHS Nightingale as well, because it's very topical and it's a very simple example. Focus of attention for Martha was what will go wrong. Not even might, what will go wrong. Even though we can't read the future, we'll get into that. That will happen. What will go wrong with COVID is everybody's going to die. I'm looking at this picture. All the people in that place will die. So she's thinking, all those people are going to die. How she feel? Low vibe, probably very anxious and fearful. And she's only 12, by the way, so, you know, but that clearly was going on for her. Where's the opportunity for baby step perspective shift? So that is, where could I focus my intention instead? So even from it will go wrong, just it might not go wrong, or it might not be as bad as I think it's going to be. That is a slight perspective shift. Trying to shift from that will go wrong to it's all going to be fine. It won't work. That's why reframing doesn't work for a lot of people. They try and quantum leap their thinking change. It doesn't work. Baby step shift. Raising awareness in this way is so simple, and it is so powerful if you practice it, and it really will bring a sense of relief. It will help you feel better. And right now, in this current phase of where we are with the uncertainty, even though we've kind of all settled into a bit of with certainness, uncertainty is going to continue, which in itself brings a little bit of stability, right? Right now, this is about how do we help ourselves and people we're working with, working for, people that are working for us. How do we help them feel some kind of relief so they feel a little bit better and more able to cope at this time? So that is a really simple process. I'm not feeling good, so I'm low vibe. We go back. I'm not feeling good. I know I'm feeling low vibe. Where's my focus of attention? Therefore, what am I thinking about? Therefore, no wonder I'm feeling that way. What's my opportunity for baby step perspective shift? Might we need to pick up the phone and go, can you help me with this, someone? Might just, you know, chat to your mate, chat to your husband, wife, whoever's living in the house with you and say, I'm actually not feeling good. I recognise I'm focusing on this. I want you to challenge me. And that is it. 15:29. It's quite unheard of. So I've got another question there.
We have. Has it surprised you how quickly we have started to adapt to a new normal?
Actually, no, it hasn't. And I'll tell you why it hasn't, is because we've kind of had no choice. And this is the challenge, right? So if you think about why things don't change and happen, it's because if you go right back to my bit about we don't actually, the accepted and the expected often don't match. We often don't get held to account. We're asked to do things differently, and we can get away with not doing it differently. I know there's some people, by the way, not following the rules. We know that. But generally speaking, people are following the rules. And when we are forced to, and when we all engage with, there's a problem to solve here, that also really helps. And what happens in business a lot of the time is we get away with not doing it differently, so not held to account. And sometimes we can't connect to the problem that there is to solve. We might not see there's a problem to solve. The leadership might, but we don't. So we won't engage in something if we don't see there's a problem. What's going on right now is there's a problem we all know it needs to be solved. We know that by following the rules, potentially it's going to help us. And we've actually got no choice because there's quite a lot of boundaries and everything been put in place. So I guess, no, I'm not. And what can we learn from this, right, going forwards in business? Any more?
We have, does age or generation type affect the approach to mindset?
Well, I don't think it does. I think it's more about the culture you've been surrounded by as you're growing up, because I've worked with some, so I think about the age range of people I work with, and I think about my children. I've got a 12-year-old and a 19-year-old. Both my kids have been surrounded by me doing this kind of thing. My 12-year-old, much more than Charlie, who's 19. Martha's been surrounded by it much more. And I would say she is much more switched on to this stuff and much more aware than Charlie is. Charlie's pretty aware, but she's got 7.5 years. She's behind him, so I've grown a lot more by then. There's some people I'm working with who in, their late 50s, 60s, who are really open to this stuff. And some people who are much younger who are not. So my view is that actually it's more of a, what is the culture of the tribe that I've grown up with been like? And if they've been more open to this and been more challenging and allowed me to feel, not told me anger's bad, not told me I'm not allowed to be sad, that kind of thing, that definitely makes a difference. That's my experience anyway.
I think that's all of our questions. It's lots of thanks for the webinar comments now. So that looks to be all our questions.
So just so you know, if you register for this, we're going to send you the recording, and we'll send you this, so you'll have the recording anywhere in the slides. So that's going to happen. Anything else I need to say, Laura, about that bit? That's it, isn't it? We'll get the recording details out.
Yeah, everyone who had the link will be sent a recording.
Yeah,
in a few days' time. Brilliant.
And you know where we are. Our website, we've got loads of stuff on there. You can get in contact with us. If you've got any questions, you can download the scale. And just feel what you're feeling. It's okay to feel shocking right now. It's okay to feel wretched. And it's actually okay if you're genuinely feeling positive. I mean, I have moments of feeling so focused with some excitement at times of the opportunities I think that will come from this just in my life, work and home. I have glimmers of that too, and that's not wrong either. So I think the main thing is, if you're not feeling positive and you see loads of stuff on social media telling you to look on the bright side, just turn it off. Because if you're not feeling that, you're not feeling that. That would be my parting comment, I think. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and look forward to seeing you on the next one. See you later. Now I've got to try and shut down now. Right, here we go. More. So I'm trying to do a really seamless exit. It just doesn't really work.